ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ good morning to all of you. On behalf of Madhwa Gnanakalpavruksha, we are bringing to you this lecture, which is going to be covering the building blocks of Sri Madhwa philosophy. In the last few weeks, we've had the opportunity to get an overview of what Madhwacharya is all about and understand a little bit about Sri Madhwacharya's life and his works. So there we got to know that Sri Madhwacharya is the incarnation of Sri Vayu and someone who came into this world to found the Dvaita Vedanta or the Dvaita philosophy, or what we know as Madhwa philosophy in the current generation, which basically sought to create and correct all the errors that had crept in over the years through different interpretations of the philosophical topics. So that was the overview of what we learned to be his life and his works. But today we are looking at, is there a way we can actually define Madhwacharya? Does it have a definition? Or is it another school of philosophy which had said so many things? And the interesting part is that, yes, there is not only a definition, there is a very sharp definition available of what is Dvaita philosophy or Madhwa philosophy, and today we have the opportunity to see this. So as I said, there are 9 tenets of Madhwa philosophy, which are in many ways the cornerstone of the philosophy itself. What we will do today is that we will look at the first 4 of these 9 tenets. So there are 9 pillars, if you can imagine, of the Madhwa edifice, and out of these 9 we will look at the first 4, and then we will look at the 5 in our session that's going to happen next week. Now, why are we giving this such a detailed treatment is the fact that this is really the cornerstone. Let's say you want to build a big building or a big edifice. The first decision that the architect has to make is how deep and how strong should be the foundation. You want to build 10 floors, then the foundation has to be built in a certain way. If it has to be 20 floors, the foundation has to be built differently. So what are those cornerstones on which the Madhwa philosophy is founded is the subject matter of discussion today. So with that, I'd like to move to the agenda today that we have. So today what we're going to be covering is, what is a philosophical construct? We have already looked at it earlier, but we will reiterate it so that it flows from that construct. Then we look at what defines that Madhwa philosophy, and then we will cover the first 4 of the 9 tenets. So by the end of the session, we have kept very specific objectives that we have at the end of each session, so that the takeaways are very clear after each session. And if some of those takeaways are not clear, we have an opportunity at the end of the session to be for us to interact on a question and answer session. So what we are talking about today is the end of today and the session next week. Please, we should be able to articulate the key tenets of the Madhwa philosophy. Suppose somebody were to ask you, what is Madhwa philosophy all about? Is it another form of philosophy, or what is it? Then we have to be able to articulate it. The second one is to understand what makes it unique. There's always, whenever a new form of philosophy came into this world, there's always a question that, do we need another form of philosophy? Does it not often times create conflict? Why not just go with whatever we have? So we should be able to say, how is it different and what is unique about it? And lastly, and very importantly for all of us, we all have to get to know what is the importance and why should we be doing and learning these things. If it does not help us in our sadhana, or in our pursuit of the truth, then things are pretty much meaningless. Yes, one can learn very intellectual topics, one can be very enamored by all the great texts which are there, written in profound language, presented most articulately, and it's a great intellectual treatise. But at the end of the day, none of it will settle into our mind if that does not connect to our heart. So therefore, let us all evaluate these tenets and look at what each of them and how does it help us solidify our sadhana. So we'll try and make that connection in this session as well as in the next session. So the philosophical world has been enriched by several thinkers. Predominantly, I mean, there are different forms of philosophy in the world, and they all came up with their own interpretations of what the world is and so on. But essentially, if you make a very broad classification, that you can also classify it on the basis of chronology, you can also classify it on the basis of what they were leading to, you can also classify it on the basis of some kind of time periods to understand how they interacted and so on and so forth. But if we were to broadly classify, there is the Western form of philosophy and there is the Eastern or the Oriental form of philosophy. And on the left, you will find, on the screen, you will find all the philosophers who propounded the Oriental philosophy. So from Plato to Friedrich Nietzsche, everybody has given their own interpretation of what the world is, what is the nature of God, and so on. On the right side, you'll find the Oriental philosophy, or the philosophy which was largely practiced in mostly parts of Asia. And it's no surprise that the spiritual capital of the world is India, because that is where you will see the bulk of religions or the different schools of philosophy actually taking birth and growing. So India, in some sense, was the cauldron of different forms of philosophy, all of them actively debating against each other with their own points of view and trying to explain the basic tenets of philosophy in their own way. There is some area of overlap where there is agreement. There are some areas where there is no agreement, there is disagreement, and the debate goes on even to this day. But if you see, this is the way a form of knowledge actually develops. You look at how different forms of science, for example, have evolved. They've all evolved because of this healthy intellectual debate, which happens amongst people who have very different views. These views don't have to be necessarily taken in as conflict, but as great debates, which started and which continue even to this day. So the Oriental philosophy starts from the Vedas, which are undated. That means they were apaurushaya, or something which nobody actually created, and it has always been there since eternity. There is no dating of the Vedas available anywhere. Now, from after that, several generations of philosophers came in. Then there was the Buddhist, the Jainist form of philosophy, the Jainism as we call it, and Kapila and Patanjala, Nyaya and Vaisheshika. And then came the three schools of philosophy, which are grounded in many ways in the Vedas itself. That means they believed that the Vedas are in some sense the proof, the ultimate proof, and while the interpretation of that Vedas might be different by all three schools of philosophy, there is a broad agreement that the Vedas in some sense are the source of that particular knowledge. And that lineage came Sri Shankaracharya, Sri Ramanujacharya, and Sri Madhwacharya. So today's session is going to be covering that aspect of Sri Madhwa philosophy, which is in this chronology, if you see, it is the latest form of philosophy. And it owes its origins to the Vedic philosophy. So whatever is said in the Vedas is what is reflected in the Madhva philosophy. Now what's the difference? The difference is Sri Madhwacharya, when it comes to interpretation of Vedas, the difference is that Madhwacharya said that the Vedas are the ultimate proof, and Vedas are very integral. It is one piece. You cannot classify the Vedas saying some part of Vedas is more important than the others. Yes, Vedas have a classification as Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Atharvana Veda. That classification has been done to ensure that each one of them can be studied and give it a kind of a finite form so that people can read it, understand it, and interpret it. But all the Vedas and every part of all the Vedas, and this is very crucial, talk only about Sri Hari. That was his unique interpretation that he brought to the Vedas. And also, he said that the Vedas are the ultimate proof. So, nothing exists beyond the Vedas. Now, his adherence and his integrity with the Vedas is so high, which is very, very evident in the way he quotes the Vedic sutras in his texts, which are called the Sarvamoola Granthas. So, we open Sarvamoola Granthas, majority of his writings are actually quotations from different parts of scriptures, and Vedas are always given the numero uno position whenever it is coming to accepting as proof. So this is the philosophical evolution. And in that evolution, whoever came into the world did three things very clearly. You can take any philosopher in the world, while they might have dealt with other topics, the core of philosophy has got three parts, which is God, there is the soul, and there is the world. The God, what is the God? Who is the God? What is the nature of God? What are his strengths? What are his limitations? What is his form? What is his intellect? What is his expanse, etc., is one part. The second part of any philosophical text or any philosophical school is the soul, or me, or us. What is the nature of soul? Who am I? What is my interaction with God? Is there a God at all? Do I see it? Do I believe it? What is my nature? What am I made up of? What is my future? And what do I need to do? Are topics which are obviously of immense importance to all of us. Because if you can't answer that question, who am I? Then life becomes more or less purposeless. Because anybody will live, grow, eat, sleep, but what does it lead to? And at the end of the life, where do we want to be? Is all dependent on who am I. Now that is the nature of the soul or the jivas. So you have God, who is called Brahma or Parabrahma, and then we have soul, which is the several souls, which are entities. Then comes the world, Jagat, as it's called. What is this world? What is this world around us with so many people, with so many objects, with so many phenomena happening in it? It rains, there is a sunrise, there is a sunset, there are hills, there are mountains, there is a nature. How does all this happen? And therefore, what should be, because I'm a part of this world, what should be my nature, and what should be my interaction with this world? So this triangle, it's a very simplistic representation, but actually, when you distill the entire essence of any forms of philosophy, it actually boils down to the understanding of what is God, what is the world, and what is the nature of the soul. So this is the understanding that we have to get to in all our philosophical pursuit. Now with this, we will look at something which is absolutely stunning and unique. We all have this conception that when it comes to any forms of philosophy, it must be something which is extremely long, extremely vast, and it is extremely difficult to even understand what it is. There is no doubt that Madhwa philosophy, like other schools of philosophy, is very detailed. It is not something which is superficial. So it has to be explained. Each topic is given its due importance, explained to people so that they understand it in entirety, and it's not treated in a wishy-washy manner. So therefore, yes, the world of philosophy is vast. But we've had the privilege of a stalwart by name Sri Vyasaraja, who was one of the descendants in the illustrious lineage of Madhwa philosophy, who came in, and when he was asked to interpret what is Madhva philosophy, he has given us this wonderful shloka, which is actually in the form of bullet points. Now, we all live in a generation where we love bullet points. If you want to understand something, you say, can you tell me point by point? Because that really helps us to understand for anything for that matter. And I think this is one of the earliest forms of bullet point presentation that Sri Vyasaraja has given us on the topic of Madhva philosophy. So he says, Shriman Madhva Mate Hari Parataraha Satyam Jagat Tatvato Bhinna Jivagana Harer Anucharaha Nichocha Bhavangataha Muktihi Naija Sukhanubhutihi Amala Bhaktischa Tat Sadhanam Yakshadi Kritayam Pramanam Akhilam Nayika Vedyo Hari. So it starts with Shriman Madhvamate Hari Parataraha Satyam Jagat Tatvato Bhinna Jivagana Harer Anuchara Ichocha Bhavangata Muktihi Naija Sukhanubhutihi Amala Bhaktischa Tat Sadhanam Yakshadi Kritayam Pramanam Akhilam Nayeka Vedyo Hari. Right? So this particular shloka is the cornerstone. So if you see here, all these 9 points, bullet points have been underlined to show in different colors to show each of the 9 tenets and how those tenets actually expand into the entire philosophical world. Right? So Shriman Madhvamatehe is one, is the starting, then start the 9 tenets. And we will look at each one of them in detail. So before we get into the 9 tenets, let us look at the first opening of the shloka, which says Sriman Madhva Mate, means in Madhva Mata or in the Dvaita Mata, and so on, right? So it is the opening. What does this word mean, Sriman Madhva Mate? Shriman, all of us know, Shriman is someone we address with respect. Shriman, a man, a gentleman is always called Shriman, and a woman is called Srimati. So why do we call it Shriman Madhvamati? Shriman means wealth, someone who is wealthy. So that is Shriman. That's a very simple interpretation. Shriman has also one more interpretation. Shriman means someone who has got control over his senses. Our different senses all try to pull us in different directions. But someone who's Shriman is someone who has got control over his senses. So that person is called Shriman. So why do we call Madhvamata or the school of philosophy as Shriman? Because it is wealth. It is wealthy with absolute true gold knowledge that we have. Shriman is always supposed to refer to something wealth. So where is the wealth? So our Shastras clearly say that the true wealth we all have is knowledge. And in today's world, this does not have to be explained. The biggest countries, the wealthiest people, are all backed up by a very, very strong body of knowledge. A company grows rich because of the IPs it creates and the wealth of knowledge that he has today. A doctor becomes a top doctor because of his expertise and because of knowledge. So anybody, be it an individual, be a family, it could be an institution, it could be an organization, it could be a country. All of us, all of them become wealthy only when they have knowledge. So Shriman Madhvamate basically connotes that it is a very rich form of knowledge which has been purified and distilled by Sri Madhwacharya and given to us in the form of the Madhvamata, which then gets expressed through the 37 texts that he gave us called the Sarvamoola Granthas. So that's the interpretation of Shriman. Madhvamatehe means Madhvamata or the school founded by Madhwacharya. Now, Madhva Mata, when we look at Mata looks like it is just another opinion. We use that word in Kannada quite common. That is their Mata, meaning to say that, it is just what they believe is the right thing. But this is not a Mata. Mata in the sense it's not somebody's opinion, but a final verdict on what is philosophy. How should it be interpreted? So Madhva Mata is not somebody's opinion, it is the opinion of all our scriptures and all our texts. So that is why it's called Madhva Mata. So Srimad Madhva Mata. So as I said, it's the most recent amongst the philosophy. Why is this important? Because it is closest to us from a time period. It has been able to overcome some some great errors which had got crept in philosophical interpretations. And it has overcome those objections that have been raised over and over again. So Madhva philosophy did not end with Madhwacharya alone. In this great lineage came some of the greatest stalwarts who then debated with all other forms of philosophies in their times, and in many ways represented and re-established the importance of Madhva Mata and superiority of the Mata and that form of philosophy over other forms. That exercise is not complete even today. And as I said, healthy debates go on even to this day. So it is the most recent, it has the most unique perspectives. Now, the Madhva Mata, the shloka that we just saw, is called Madhva Mata the Nava Prameyagalu. That means the Nava means 9, as we know in Sanskrit. Nava Prameyagalu means the 9 tenets of Madhva philosophy. But Nava also has one more interpretation, which is Nava meaning new. So why do we call it new? Because it's unique. There were aspects of Madhva philosophy, which we will see in detail in today's session and the sessions after that, that had come up with very unique interpretations of the scriptures and found it to be tagged along with all the original inscriptions of our scripture. Meaning to say, there is a lot of consistency amongst the scriptures and what the Madhva philosophy brings out. They are not two different things. They are the same things. So it's unique. It has its own form of epistemology. What is epistemology? Meaning, what is the system of proof? What do you accept as proof? So when you go to a court and there's a case which is being fought, what is constituting proof is a very important aspect. So it has defined its own form of proof, because if you don't lay those ground rules, then you will not be able to play a game. Every game has a set of rules, and you have to define those rules before you start playing the game. You can't start it afterwards. So therefore, it has got its own form of epistemology. We will try and see that in the sessions. One of the lines called Hyakshadikritayam Pramanam. That means what constitutes Pramana or proof will be covered in the next session. And it is a science of experience. So Madhwacharya always said that, look, you can hear a lot of things, but ultimately it is up to you to accept what comes to your mind and what comes to your experience as the ultimate. When you hear a philosophical topic, ponder over it, think about it, and accept it only if it matches your own personal experiences. If it does not coincide or it is not consistent with what you experience, don't accept it. You have every right to raise a question about that interpretation. That is another very unique form of the philosophy, because not every form of philosophy is equally open to interpretations. And they say, no, take it or leave it, or my way or the highway. Madhwacharya's structure of his entire text is never that way. It is full of question and answer. It's almost like a frequently asked questions that we read in a manual. It is something like that. So it comes up with its own science of experience. Now, this form of Madhva Mata is got a countrywide aspiration of Sri Madhwacharya. So Sri Madhwacharya inspired many other forms of philosophy of this philosophy to be adapted in different parts of the country. So his bhakti movement was adapted by people from coming from different states. And today you can see the footprint of Bhakti movement, the movement, the adaptations of the the Vaishnavism happening all over the country in manifesting in different ways. And it Madhvamata is very, very important because it is called the Samanvaya, or being able to make it consistent with all the Vedas and the Puranas. So whatever is said in Madhvamata has been interpreted in a similar way in the scriptures. What is said in the scriptures comes to us in the form of comes to us in the form of Madhvamata. So it's a super consistent way, and this consistency gets tested every time. And every time Sri Madhwacharya offers the reasons why whatever he is saying as the form of philosophy is something which is consistent with all other scriptures. One last word before we get into the tenets is that Madhva philosophy is not a new form of philosophy which was started by Sri Madhwacharya. Madhwacharya propagated it. This always existed in all the four yugas and from time eternity. These are eternal concepts. Yes, it has been represented since the 12th century in the form of what we know as Madhva Shastra. But it has been something which has always been there. So this is a great eternal lineage that we are all having an opportunity to study about. So with that, let's move into the first tenet, and probably in many ways the most critical tenet of Madhva philosophy. Why it is consistent? You will have to attend the second part of this to understand how this is really the hub and spoke model that we call, where Hari Paratara is the center of gravity, and all other aspects are concepts which are revolving around it. I will explain more of that in the next session. But now, the first tenet is Hari Parataraha. So what is this? Why do we say Hari Parataraha? Hari Parataraha, because meaning Hari, Lord Hari, Narayana, Vasudeva, is Parataraha, is someone who is very different. Someone very, very different from every other entity in this universe. So we said God, we said soul, and we said the world. In this God is none other than Parabrahma or Brahman, as Sanskrit texts always would use the word Brahman, meaning Hari. Hari here, by word of Brahman, it is not Chaturmukha Brahma. Chaturmukha Brahma is the greatest of the souls, but the one who is supreme is Parataraha. So we always thought, why don't we use the word Paraha? Paraha means different. So we should have just used word Paraha. Why Parataraha? The reason we want to be very, very clear that when we say Harihi Paraha, it is not a marginal difference. It is a difference between the number 1 and infinity. What's the difference between 1 and infinity? It's infinite times. To emphasize that, we have used the word Harihi Parataraha. So Goddess Lakshmi is Para. Goddess Lakshmi is different also from the souls, because she is above all the souls and she does not have any destruction. That is, she is Nitya. That means she is always present. There is no end to Lakshmi, Mahalakshmi. Whereas everyone below her, like Chaturmukha Brahma, Vayu, etc., other people in the hierarchy, they all have a destruction to their body. Their soul is eternal, but their body destroys. And they move from one birth to the other birth. Whereas Goddess Lakshmi, never ever, there is absolutely there is no chance of her actually looking at any kind of destruction. There's some text which is coming up on the screen. Yeah, so that is Harihi Parataraha. So Goddess Lakshmi is Para and Vishnu is Parataraha, meaning he's above Goddess Lakshmi. So he is the supreme being. What is that defining quality which is different from between him and everybody else? Is Swatantriya. That means he is absolutely independent. And everybody is completely dependent on him. Now, why is this important? Because we all can say, for example, we say India is an independent country. Yes, no doubt, India is an independent country because we have an independent political leadership. But India is dependent on so many countries for so many different things. So it is not an independence in the absolute sense. All of us can say, oh my God, I am completely independent. I can do whatever I want. No, you're not. The fact is, you take a car and go out on the road, immediately, if you're driving in India, they'll say keep left. You can't go right. So you are not independent to do whatever you want. You have to stick to a larger framework. And this doesn't need any great explanation because our dependence on everything is something that we experience on a daily basis. So, who is Swatantra? Swatantro Bhagavan Vishnu. Or who is independent? Is Lord Vishnu. We are all dependent on him. The many other interpretation of Para. It is omnipresent. Harihi, Lord Narayana, is omnipresent. He is omnipowerful in this world. And this is a matter of physics. There is only one source of energy in this world. And that source of energy is Hari. Why can't we have different sources of energy? No. There can be different sources of energy, but they all culminate in one source, one large source of energy. So, Srimad Madhwacharya in Anuvyakhyana stated beautifully, Tatra sthito Vishnu Tattat Shakti Prabhodayan Ekameva Mahashakti Kurute Sarvamanjasa. So what he says is, there is really only one source of energy. And that one source of energy manifests itself in different ways around us. I think this is not, again, difficult to understand. There's one electricity connection that comes into your house, but it manifests in so many different ways. That electricity shows your television, that electricity cools something in your refrigerator, that electricity heats up something in a water heater, and the same electricity runs a pump and sucks water. The same electricity pumps water, it throws out water. So one form of energy, there's only one source which is coming from, as a wire, but it manifests in different ways. So every form of energy in this world is coming from a single source, and that source is Hari Paratara. That is why it is Hari Paratara. Then it is complete. Hari is Parataraha because he is complete. We have no aspect of our personality is complete. We have limitations. We have constraints in everything that we do. But Lord Hari is absolutely independent and he's complete in every aspect. Perfect completion. And how do we understand all of this? We'll come in the next point, but here it's beautifully said in Purnamada, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamuchyate, Purnasya Purnamadaya, Purname Vavashishyate. He is complete in every sense. Purna, 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 everywhere. There's absolutely no adequacy of any type in his life. So this is the first tenet, which is called Harihi Paratara. Now I have quoted some of the Devarnamas mainly to reflect how beautifully Haridasa Sahitya has captured these tenets in many ways. There is a limitation of time and there's also a limitation of space on a slide, but one can fill up 100 slides with quotations coming from Haridasa Sahitya. Madhva Matave Matavu Sakala Shruti Sammatavu. That Madhva Mata is the only Mata, mainly because it has got the acceptance of all the Shrutis or all the Vedas. And it says, Shripati Purandara Vithalane Paranendu Hodi Nagari Mele Kaya. So there is a very famous Devarnama called Hodi Nagari Mele Kaya. There Purandarasa is saying, hit on the band and say it loud that Hari indeed is Paraha. Shripati Purandara Vithalane Paranendu. That means Purandara Vithala or Hari himself is very different from the others. So this is manifested in different ways, different shlokas of Dvadashi Stotra. Kuru Bhungshvacha Karma Nijam Niyatam Haripada Vinamratiya Satatam Harireva Paro. Harireva Paro, he says. Harireva Paro means Hari, only Hari is Paraha. Not everybody is Paraha. Harireva Paro, Harireva Guru. Everybody is a Guru, but he is a Guru of the Gurus. Our Guru is Madhwacharya, but who is his Guru? It is Hari. So Harireva Guru, Harireva Jagat, Pitrumatra Gati. He is the only person who is our true parent, who is the only true father and true mother. Everybody else who are our biological parents have all got that ability to have children, as well as gives them the strength to nurture a child. All that comes from Sri Hari. So he is the true reservoir of that strength, of that knowledge, of that energy. So very, very important aspect called Hari Paratara. So let's move to the next one, which is Satyam Jagat. The next tenet is Satyam Jagat. It says that this world that is there is not an illusionary world. It is a very real world. So why was this needed? This is needed because several forms of philosophy believe that this world that we are living is an illusionary world. Why? Because it always changes. If the world changes, it doesn't make it illusionary. It makes it impermanent. That is accepted because the world around us that we see today is all different. It has changed in our lifetime. We see so many changes around us. People come, people die. Trees grow up, they go away. New buildings come up. New things change. New roads are built. The weather changes. The time the sunrise and sunset happens changes. Suddenly it begins to snow. Sometimes it's blazing hot. Suddenly it rains. All these changes keep happening. That makes the world impermanent. But it is not an illusionary world. Why is it? Why do people say it's illusionary? Because people say, other forms of philosophy have said the world is illusionary because we don't have enough knowledge or we have agnana. The moment this agnana goes, you will realize this world is illusionary. That is the position that many forms of philosophy taken. Madhwacharya said, absolutely no way. This world is not illusionary. Why? Because this world was created by Sri Hari. Sriman Madhvamate Hari Paratara. Hari has created this world. So if you are trying to tell us that this world is illusionary, you will have to say that the person who created is also illusionary. Are you willing to say that God or the Almighty is actually an illusionary person? And why will somebody say this? Why will somebody create a world and claim that that world is his, and that being illusionary? Because he does not have the power to do it. But God does have the power to create a real world. So there is absolutely no reason why he will pretend certain things, right? So for example, you might just go, let's say you're feeling weak and you're not able to run that day. You go for a run every day for 5 kilometers. That day you're not able to run. You come and somebody asks you, have you run? Somebody may just say, yeah, I've run for 5 kilometers. He is creating an illusion that he actually ran for 5 kilometers, whereas he could not do it. Why did he do it? Because he does not have the capacity to do it. He could not run that particular day. But God or Sri Hari is not a person who has to pretend at any stage that this world that he has created is illusionary, because he has the power to create a real world. So the other major objection that Madhwa had for this particular interpretation is, what did people say? This world is an illusion, right? So let us give an example which is commonly used in the philosophical text. It says simple. You're walking on a street. It's late in the night. It's quite dark, and when you're walking, there is a rope which is fallen on the road, and you look at the rope and think, oh my God, is that a rope or is it a snake? Not clear. Both look alike, and at a distance, you're not able to make up. Then you go very slowly, you go near it, trying to see, oh my God, if it's a snake, what do I do? But then when you get close, slowly you get close, and you start tapping your feet just to scare it away. There's no movement. And you say, oh my God, this is not a snake, it is a rope. Right? So What has happened just now? You've seen a rope. It looks like a snake. When you went closer, you realize that is not a snake. Now, if this world, so you had an illusion that that rope is a snake. Now, come back to our world. The world around us, if it is an illusion, what does it mean? You looked at a building. Building doesn't really exist, but it's just an illusion that it's there. If you want to have an illusion that a certain building actually exists, you should have seen a similar building somewhere else. And that is why you have an illusion that this thing, which actually does not exist according to others, is that building. If you had not seen that building, you wouldn't have been able to look at this particular building and say, oh, this is that Rockefeller's building in New York. To interpret something as a building which is Rockefeller's building in New York, you should have seen the Rockefeller's building somewhere, at least in a photograph or in a movie, and then you can say, okay, I've seen that, and this doesn't seem to be that. So therefore, if somebody says this world is an illusion, they should be prepared to accept that they have seen a world very similar to this somewhere else. So in the process of proving one world is an illusion, they've actually created two worlds. Which is some other world which nobody knows where it exists, and here is an illusion of that world or an image of that world. So therefore, instead of creating many types of illusions, Madhwa says it's better to accept the world that's there in front of us, which you're all touching, we are all feeling, we are all smelling, and we can see it. And it's nobody's experience that this world is an illusion. Has anybody had a experience that this world that we are seeing with bright eyes, wide open, is actually an illusion? Absolutely no. Nobody has had that experience. And as I said, his Madhva Mata is based on your own experiences. So when it's not an experience that we've had, unfortunately, we cannot accept the fact that this world is asat or an illusion. So Satyam Jagat, that means the world that we have around it, is the second tenet. Let's move to the third one, which is on Tattvato Bhinna. That means there are different types of entities in the world. We've already described it. We have looked at God as one entity. There is soul or me, and there is the world. We know this. We are very familiar with this. So there are different types of entity. This world is not made of entities which are absolutely homogeneous. There is heterogeneity. Tattvato Bhedaha. That means there are different entities which make up this universe. And the five types of differences that exist between God, soul, and the world. That means between the God and soul there is a difference. Between the soul and the world there is a difference. There is a difference between the God and the world. So that makes it three differences. Now there is a difference in the different entities which constitute the world, which is the fourth difference. And last one is that the souls themselves, each soul is unique. Each soul is unique. Every soul is different from the other. That is the fifth difference. So all these five constitute what is called the Pancha Bheda. That means there are five different types of differences. The difference between God and soul, God and world, the world and the soul, difference between entities within the world, and differences in the entities which are different types of souls. All of them are unique. So these are five different differences that exist. And why do we classify? We classify because we want to understand everything in greater detail. So all of us have studied biology. What do they say in biology? The moment you say there are different types of plants. So even within biology, there is zoology, there is botany. In botany, again, there is a classification. Saying, okay, botany is the study of plants. And there are two types of plants. Monocotyledons and dicotyledons. And again, there is a classification. Why do we classify? Because we want to understand each entity in greater detail. So, Madhwacharya first classifies the entities into two parts, which is God on one side, who is Swatantra, and the other entities on the other side. So that's the first classification. And then, of course, in his great text, Tattva-Sankhya, which is one of the most basic Sarvamula Granthas, just 11 shlokas, he explains these entities in greater detail. Should an opportunity exist at a later date, we can look at this in finer details. So more the classification, more is the clarity and what to focus on. Because once you have divided the world into two pieces, which is God and the world, you're clear that your focus has to be understanding of God, because the world is a much, much smaller entity compared to God. And Harikatamrita Sara very clearly says, Pancha Bhedatmaka Prapanchavu. That means the universe has 5 different types of entities. Again, another example of how Haridasa Sahitya says this. So I know we are going a little beyond 45 minutes, but I'll take another few minutes to cover the 4th tenet, which is Hare Jivagana, Hare Ranucharaha. Here he says, now in our classification, we said souls. The souls are different. Jiva Ganaha means plural. That means there are many types of souls. And all of them are Hare Ranucharaha. That means they're all completely dependent on God. They are servants of God. So therefore, everything that we do is 100% in the control of God. That's the meaning of Jiva Ganaha, Hare Ranucharaha. That one entity, which is Hari, is several times greater than infinite number of souls. All the souls individually and coming together in groups, and all the souls put together cannot equal this entity called Hari. That's why they have said Jiva Gana Hare Raja. Even if they all come together, will be infinitely lesser in their strength, in their presence, in their capabilities compared to Sri Hari. And the souls are completely dependent on the God for everything, from their birth to their living to their death and post their death. They're completely dependent on God for everything. Today, the Gita says very well. It says every simple thing that we do, Pashyan, Shunvan, Sprishan, means to see, to hear, for everything we need grace of God. And is this something that is difficult for us to, understand? Not at all. Just go through our life. Just go through today's life on how many things we have been dependent on a supreme entity. Isn't it? From morning we all woke up. We said, okay, this is what we are going to do. Does it happen as per the plan? And we say, okay, I ate my breakfast. I did not depend on any. 100% we depended on God. Every single item that we ate, we have not produced it, and nobody can produce it. It has to come by itself. It's a natural product. Let us say you ate rice. The man can only sow seeds. Can he make it grow? Can he make soil? You cannot make one grain of soil. The water, have we created the water? The sunlight, none of that has been created by us. We are just mere instruments. And the Jivagana, the souls, are completely dependent on God over everything. You may say, okay, forget it. Somebody made it. I ate it. We did not eat it. Somebody made us to eat it. For anybody who has doubts, they should go to a hospital where the food is right in front of them. The man is probably the richest man, but he is unwell. He is not able to eat. Why? Because internally the energy, he does not have the energy to eat. And even if he's eaten, to be able to digest, we all have problems when we eat. Some days we are not able to digest food. Sometimes we vomit the food out because we are not able to eat. If we were all powerful and we could do everything in our lives, these things would never have happened. The very fact that we have each of these things happens to us on a daily basis is underlining the simple fact that we are completely dependent on God. And so the question is, are there similarities between the soul and the God? Yes, there are a few similarities. Similarity is both of them are chetana or sentient beings. That means both of them have a life. Both of them are alive. They are not people, they're not entities which are dead. They are not like a stone. So the soul and the God have that in common, and both of them have been there since eternity. So these are certain common factors, but just because they are common doesn't mean that they are equal. For example, in a large organization, let's take a school. In school, there are many parts of the school. All of them belong to the same school. For example, there is the headmistress, there's a person who, or the principal, there are teachers, there are people who are working as supporting staff, there are people who are driving the kids to the school. There are children inside a school, all of them belonging to a different grade. But what do we say? Yeah, they all belong to the same school. But they belong to the same school, but they are all very, very different. So therefore, God and the souls have certain things in commonality, but that does not make them equal, right? So that is why in Mahabharata Tatvam-asi, the uh, Bhagavad Gita, he said in Nirnaya, Sri Madhwacharya says very well, Naham karta hari karta, tat puja karma chakilam, tathapi mad krupa puja tat prasadena nanyatha, tat bhaktis tat phalam mahyam, tat prasadena punah punaha, karmanyaso haravevam Vishnoho tripti karasada. He says, I am not the doer. Naham karta, hari karta. God is the one who's done it. So anybody who lives life like this is going to be a happy soul because he has accepted his limitation and he has actually manifested that in the form of his service towards God. And whatever he does around him, he says, the energy has come from you, oh God, and this is a service that I'm doing it, to please you. So that is the fourth tenet, which is called Jiva Ganaha Hare Ranucharaha. So with that, we will go back to our shloka and recite it once more. I would strongly suggest that you wake up every day in the morning and sometime during the day recite this, because in many ways this captures so beautifully the 9 tenets. Now these 9 tenets, when you study the philosophy, you will realize that had there been is there a 10th tenet or only 9? There is only 9. The 10th tenet, if at all it is there, is nothing but a mishmash of one or more of these tenets. And can it be 8? No, it cannot be 8, because anything that you take away from this will lead it will open up a door, and it will create a lacuna in our understanding of philosophy. To be absolutely convinced about all this, you will have to attend the next session as well, where we are covering the other 5 tenets. But today, take a pause with Srimad Madhva Hari Parataraha Satyam Jagat Tattvato Bhinna Jivagana Hare Ranucharaha Ichocha Bhavagnataha Muktihi Naija Sukhanubhutihi Amala Bhaktischa Tat Sadhanam Shakshadikritayam Pramanam Akhilam Nayika Vidyo Harihi. The shloka starts from Harihi Parataraha, ends with Akhilam Nayika Vidyo Harihi. And in between there is Hare Ranucharaha. It's another way of reiterating the centrality of Sri Hari in our philosophical pursuit. So, in the next session, which is going to be on 14th of March, next week, we will go through the second part of this session, which is on the 9 tenets of Madhva philosophy. So once again, thanks everybody for having joined this. On everybody's behalf, I thank Sri Madhwacharya, Sri Jaitirtha, Sri Vyasarajuru, and all our illustrious Guru, Sri Raghavendra Swamiji, who have made it possible for us to understand Madhva Mata even today in such a simple form. And of course, the bulk of all the writings is explaining one or several of these tenets in greater detail. So with this, I will take a pause and see if there are any questions that you have on this topic. I would request you to restrict yourself to the lecture today, so that we can answer these questions adequately. Thank you, and Hari Nama. So there is a question: when Jiva moves on from this materialistic world, is there a possibility of that Jiva to come back as Jada? If yes, what is the opportunity for it to go back? No, a Jiva will never go back as a Jada. A Jiva will always remain Jiva. It has its own nature, which is called Jiva Swarupa. A Jiva will never go out. So one can say, let's look at a person when he's alive, and after some time he dies. So when he dies, does the Jiva go away? The Jiva leaves the body. The body is dead. The Jiva is not dead. And the Jiva then goes to its destiny, whatever that destiny is, but the Jiva never becomes Jada. The Jiva never becomes Jada. Jada can never become a Jiva. Jada's own nature, Jiva Swarupa, cannot change, and Jiva can never become Brahman, whatever may be the spiritual elevation that they have. I hope I have answered the question. Are there any further questions? Please do type it. Yes. What is the definition of moksha in the context of souls and Brahman? So, Brahman is the giver of that salvation, someone who bestows that salvation on others. But in the context of soul, there are three types of soul. We will look at it in the subsequent session. Jiva Ganaha. In the next one, we will explain what is the concept of mukti. For a soul, there are three types of souls. One is the Satvika, Rajasa, Tamasa. The Satvika souls, if they have completed their sadhana, they will attain moksha, or they will attain the Vaikuntha Loka, or a state of permanent happiness, or what we call as nirvana. The other one, the tamasic souls will go to their destination, which is Andan Tamas, or a state of permanent darkness. That is what the tamasic jivis will do. But for the ones in the middle, Satvika Rajasa, those people, they are called Nitya Samsaris. That means they'll keep coming into the world, experience some amount of happiness, experience some amount of sorrow, they go back and again keep coming back in a chakra, Kala chakra, life cycle. But in the context of Sri Hari, he is the one who bestows this concept of moksha. No matter how eligible a soul is, he cannot make a claim to God to give him salvation. It is only his discretion that gives us salvation. So that's the concept, that's the definition of moksha in the context of souls. So when we say moksha, again, it is, as I said, it's got three different types. Moksha always does not mean liberation. It is liberation from the current world, but it means three different things to the three different types of soul. Yeah, so what is the hierarchy of Hari Lakshmi? What is the significance of Lakshmi's presence? Very good question, madam. I think if you, as I described, the definition and the hierarchy goes like this. Hari is absolutely independent. He is the supreme. Goddess Lakshmi is his wife, he is his consort, and she is Nitya Muktadu. That means she is someone who's always there with Sri Hari. There is no concept of destruction of Mahalakshmi, nor that post will ever be vacant. Like Brahma, Chaturmukha Brahma, that's a post. So when the current incumbent moves on, somebody who's as per a succession planning, somebody else will come and take that role. Similarly, Vayu, somebody else below him will then get promoted into that role. Whereas for Goddess Lakshmi, her name is Nitya or Nitya Muktadu. That means because she's always there, she never goes away. She has got equivalence to God. Deshatak Kalatas Chaiva, as Madhwacharya says. That means she is present wherever Sri Hari is there, Goddess Lakshmi is there. That's why we always say Lakshmi Narayana, Lakshmi Narayana. Because there's no concept of them getting separated at any point in time. That is not true for all the other souls. The husband and the wife in that context do get separated. Here it's not like that. They are always, these two entities are always together, and they, both of them are capable of bestowing moksha on the soul. However, as is mentioned in the Gita, Goddess Lakshmi, for her to be bestowing moksha is very difficult because she's very, very choosy and very strict in her guidelines about who should be given moksha. That's why Lord Krishna himself says in the Bhagavad Gita that you should pray to me. Don't pray to Goddess Lakshmi because very difficult to get mukti under her tutelage or her powers. So therefore, that is the form of Mahalakshmi. Srimad Madhwacharya, of course, there is a lot that we can talk about Goddess Lakshmi. Clearly says that how big or how great is Goddess Lakshmi compared to Chaturbhuka Brahma or Vayu. He says she's at least 1 crore times bigger than Brahma and Vayu. So people say, "Oh, is that all?" I mean, okay, so she's one. So she's still. He says, "No, she's much more than that." But you guys will not get a concept of any number below beyond 1 crore. So let's just take it as 1 crore because she's so great that she's actually. It becomes difficult to measure what her what her uh, what her expanse and what her powers are. So she is the nature, or she is called Prakriti, and she is the one who actually creates the whole world. She she then guides Brahma, Shiva, and all the other gods to perform their ordained duties, and it is her under her tutelage that the whole world runs. So if I give a corporate example, Srihari is the CEO and Goddess Lakshmi is the chief operating officer of this entire universe. We know that fundamentally there are many commonalities between Dvaita, Advaita, and Vishishtha Advaita. And sometime during this Pravachana series to extend. Yes, I think that's a great suggestion. We will definitely do that. There are, as I said, it's not a raging battle where all these three forms of philosophy are permanently at loggerheads. That's not the case. It might appear like that, but it's not the case. In reality, actually, all there is a common ground which many of these philosophies have found. However, the differences when they exist are fairly fundamental in nature. That is why these exist. I'll be more than happy to conduct a short session which talk about the differences between different forms of philosophy. Thank you, sir, Mr. Mohan Nagarajan, for your kind words. Thank you, Nandini, madam. Hope I've answered the question. Okay. So if there are no further questions, I'd like to close this session with a big thank you to the New England Sri Raghavendra Swami Vrindavanam organization, which has which started something fantastic on Madhwa Day, but have not been restricted to that. Have not restricted this philosophy to study of this philosophy to only that day, but have taken it further. Now, the series of lectures are meant to give an introduction to the great world of Madhva philosophy, and the objective is clear: is to clearly inspire people to take up the study of the philosophy in greater detail. And Madhva philosophy is available to us in so many different ways, so many interesting ways, that one can find multiple ways of studying this philosophy. You've read the Devarnama of Vijayadasaru or Gopaladasaru or Jagannathasaru or Purandarasaru or Raghavendra Swamiji or Vyasarajaru or Sripadarajaru or Vadirajaru. Anything that you read is manifesting Madhva philosophy. So whether you are reading a Devarnama, you're reading a small shloka in Dwadasha Stotra, you're reciting Vishnu Sahasranama, you're quoting something from Mahabharata or Ramayana, all of them, or reciting a Veda Sukta, or reciting even a shloka of one of our Guru. If you are saying Sri Purna Bodha Guru Tirtha Payogdipara, which is a shloka of Raghavendra Swamiji, that itself has got Nijot Bhavangataha, all these aspects are beautifully manifested in those slokas as well. So we all read the Raghavendra Swami Stotra. It says Sri Madhvata Vardhanaha, Sri Madhvamata Vardhanaha. That means someone who propagated Madhva philosophy. So it is their prime, they took it as their prime objective and goal in their life to spread the Dvaita philosophy. So today Madhva philosophy stands very tall in the whole world, primarily because it is the only form of philosophy which believes in absolute dualism. That means God and the soul are different in every sense, and there is at no stage do these two entities culminate in any way. So, with this, I thank all of you for your patience and attending this on a Sunday morning US time, Sunday evening India time if you're joining. and look forward to having you present at the next session, where we will look at the next 5 tenets. And last, we will bring it all together in the form of why Sri Hari Parataraha is actually the central piece, and all the others are like planets which are going around this particular central aspect. Thank you to all of you, and Hare Namaha. Namaskar.